Hello everyone. Welcome back. This is Peter Ingle, a spiritual author, various fourth way books, as well as integrating fourth way with non-duality and exploration of consciousness. And this is Mihai Algiu, a somatic psychotherapist, but also a seeker and practitioner of truth, founder of Circle of Being Somatic Shadow Work. And we are continuing our discussion. So this is episode number 3. In the body of this, so below you will find a link to our previous 2 episodes. This is a series called Reigniting the Fragments of the Fourth Way. So it's very much based on the teachings of the fourth way as it came to us into the West via Gurdjieff and Ouspensky and other masters. So that's the primary intention, to present these ideas as well as to discuss in a way to make them more practical for ourselves and everyone interested. The first episode was so if you just happen to come across this one, we suggest to watch the other ones. The first part was our intention. The second episode was actually on outlining some of the important fourth way principles, including the why is it called fourth way and different paths available to a spiritual seeker, first, second, third, and fourth way. We go into depth there, and then last episode we also have talked about an idea that's very relevant, and we are going to use that idea in our presentation. Is that there are four states of consciousness, 4 states of consciousness available to a human being, and we outline in depth. 2 of them, they happen to everybody, man as it is, and 2 other states of consciousness are available only through, let's say, a constant intention, conscious effort, and being focused on this type of work with a serious intention and for a long period of time. Then we can have access to 3rd state of consciousness, self-consciousness, and as well as the 4th state, which in non-duality it's talked as objective consciousness or universal consciousness. So we talked in depth about that in the previous episode. And it's really important to say again something that Ouspensky used to say whenever he would talk, is that these are not our ideas. These come from a higher mind. If they were just Mihai or Peter's ideas, they would be just another new theories and ideas created by a regular mind, confused and in sleep. And there's a higher tradition of higher knowledge that we try to present here faithfully. And again, do not believe us. And the suggestion is to be open, try to verify for yourself, not believe whatever we say, not believe what Ouspensky or Gurdjieff say, and try to be open. Put aside what you know, especially this episode. We are going to talk about certain ideas that you may have. Your mind will link, oh, this is like in chakras, or oh, this is like that. Yeah, so watch your mind trying to understand by linking with other ideas that you know, which is a legitimate effort, but the best you can, try to put aside everything that you know and just be open, try to observe for yourself. Yeah. And all of these talks that we do, it's all for the purposes of fulfilling the potentiality of human being to become from a unfinished, tortured, asleep soul to wake up our true self that is dormant, and to live a life of full potential, of creativity, of full loving, of peace, and instead of living as an as an acorn, to live as a fully embodied, awake oak tree, aware of itself and aware of the relation with all that is. So this is what we are doing here. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
So yeah, today we are actually planning to talk about very essential teaching of the fourth way. This idea of the many eyes, called the many eyes, and we'll need to explain a little bit about that, as well as the four centers, which create these impulses in the many eyes. But I think it would be good to pass it on to you, Peter, so you can start us off here.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and just to be clear, when we say many eyes, we don't mean EYES. We mean
not eyes,
I apostrophe S or apostrophe I apostrophe S, the many feelings of I, me, mine. So that's what's meant by the many eyes in the fourth way. And I was thinking, Mihai, we could start just by pointing out, especially for those who are probably already familiar with the concept of body and mind in other teachings. That's a common non-dual phrase, Advaita. A lot of Eastern traditions speak about the body and the mind. And where the fourth way is interestingly distinct in this regard is it really breaks the body and the mind each into two separate categories. And so with the case of the body, the fourth way delineates a moving center, what's called a moving center, which is the brain or the center behind all of our movements, all of our learned movements. Anything you've learned to do, walk, talk, not talking necessarily, but walking, writing, reading, riding a bicycle, typing, building things with your hands. All of these are the moving center. And you can think of it simply as movement in space. We have a center in us, a brain in us that perceives and relates to the world through spatial dimensions and how to move within a three-dimensional space. And a further distinction of the body, and the other teachings do mention this sometimes in the form of sensations. They'll say thoughts, feelings, and sensations. This is the brain of our sensations. And these are all things in the body we don't have to learn. They come inborn. Sneezing and coughing, our reactions sometimes when we laugh or cry, how we digest our food, how the body heals a wound. There are many examples of this, but the main guideline, you might say, is this is the brain that functions sort of automatically to take care of the body. We don't have to think about making the food digest. It gets digested. It gets turned into nutrients and so forth.
And this one is the instinctive center, right?
The instinctive center, it's called. Yes, it's called the instinctive center. And just the word itself resonates with the word sensations. It's very instinctive. But before I go on to talk about the other two centers, just in general, and the more we talk, the more we will elaborate about all of them. But Mihai, do you have anything you'd like to add about either the moving or the instinctive center?
Well, I wanted to add something here. And I love how you said it. In other teachings, in the non-duality, they say, oh, this is your body mind. And then they are interested in that which is aware, in the knower of the body mind, but that is the body mind. In the fourth way, Gurdjieff called it the machine. It's like automaton. It's like the machine, the vehicle. Yeah, this is the also from the point of view of these teachings, consciousness, that which is aware, is the owner and operator of the body mind, owner and operator of this machine. And in the fourth way, actually, Gurdjieff found that it's important to actually study this body-mind thoroughly, rather than just call it the body-mind and then focus on awareness. Part of the work is to as they say, to know thyself. Know thyself. Socrates would say that there are two aspects to it: to know the phenomenal aspect of what we are, that what comes and goes, thoughts, feelings, sensation, images. That's the phenomenal aspect. And then there's another aspect of know thyself, is to know the knower, to have a sense of what is that which is aware of the body mind. Yeah. So coming back to the fourth way, in the fourth way, it was deemed very important, especially knowing that almost everybody, when we start from a position of being asleep. Consciousness, the owner and operator, is asleep. So now the machine, the body mind, operates by itself somehow, or with minimum level of consciousness. Yeah. So Gurdjieff, or in the fourth way, the idea was to study this body mind, to learn how it operates, to become more aware of this body mind. And I'll come to you, Peter. In the fourth way, the idea was that, hey, we have this brain, but actually this brain and the nervous system, this is what science knows, although also now science knows there are three parts of the brain: the frontal cortex, and then the limbic part of the brain, and the reptilian brain, which is interesting. In the fourth way, the brain is actually coordinating the activity of these four different autonomous, independent functions, centers. Yeah, that they have their own function and their own role. And that's how it was designed. Basically, the human vehicle, the human machine, it was designed like this. Just like the idea is that other vehicles, like let's say an insect or a crocodile or an elephant, these are other vehicles, and some of them have one center, other will have two centers, and other three centers. So the body mind has these four centers. So we are going into explaining a little bit and teaching the function of each center. And Peter started with the moving center and the instinctive center. I just wanted to give a little bit of the context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so one distinction between the moving center and the instinctive center, which is easy to understand, is that, as Peter said, the moving center comes empty slate. When we are born, the baby can do nothing, cannot even sit up. So every movement, they need to be learned. You know, tying the shoes, even learning how to eat with a spoon. Walking, all of these tasks, they need to be learned. Yeah, so the moving center is responsible for the kinetic aspect and comes like a blank slate. We need to learn that. As we learn it, it becomes automatic. We'll go into this more later. The instinctive center, although it's still, you know, as Peter said, the instinctive and moving center, they are very much connected with the body, the body, the carriage, so to say. The instinctive center, they say, as being the one that governs the internal activity of all this digestion, immune system, the development of, from one angle, the development of the body as it is in the embryo, the circulatory system, the breathing, all of this comes fully formed. Basically, we don't have to think about it. It's just is fully formed, operates by itself. The breathing, the beating of the heart, the millions of processes that are like a miracle in itself. They are happening by itself. It's already been wired. And Gurdjieff was saying that, or someone was saying that, if we were to have to learn this, how to metabolize enzymes and how to learn these things, to learn the instinctive center, our human species would have died, disappeared a long time ago. So that's a big difference between the moving center and the instinctive center. However, they work with each other. It's like the body. All right, so we talked so far just opening the hood of the body, the moving instinctive center, and we are going to go in more depth a little later, but we would like to go now into depicting the other two centers. So, yeah, would you like to take it from here, Peter?
Sure. I wanted to say too, even as we're speaking, Mihai, even as we're explaining all of this, do you know, our body, like my eyes will look around sometimes, I'll feel this sensation of heat or the temperature in the room. We gesticulate a little bit. That's the moving center. And this is interesting because often when people speak, even though we speak, we mean to convey things intellectually and emotionally to other people. Our moving center comes in. We express ourselves. We dramatize when our voice dramatizes something. We gesticulate accordingly. Now, granted, oftentimes that's overdone. And the reason it's overdone is sometimes the moving center will try to do work for the intellectual center or for the emotional center. We'll explain this more, but this is something we can observe right now while we're talking. And there's nothing wrong with any of this. This is how we function as a human being. To go back for a moment, though, to the other. Yes.
Sorry, hold the thought. So also for the listeners, for the listeners right now, as you're watching us, you can be aware of subtle movements, like the body is kind of adjusting position and all kind of fidgeting or all kind of things like that. They are happening. Usually we are totally unaware of them. It happens by itself. But it's interesting as a way to be more present to what is here, to observe these slight adjustments. This is the moving center. Also, we can notice sensations. Maybe you're hungry, or maybe it's like you just ate some nice soup, and it's like, yeah, or it's cold, or you're a little uncomfortable. So that's the instinctive center that we are aware of. Yeah, so we can all make it experiential. All right, Peter.
And also, as these things are happening, which Mihai described, there's a feeling of I associated with them. I'm hungry. I feel a little uncomfortable in my chair. I need to scratch my face. It's I. And we're going to talk about this more and more, but this is the value of knowing, having this knowledge, these distinctions and nuances of what consciousness is not. These are what the fourth way calls the functions of the four centers. These are the four centers functioning. The same thing applies to what the fourth way calls, instead of the mind comprising thoughts and feelings, there's actually a separate brain for thoughts and a separate brain or center for feelings. And then they're called quite simply the intellectual center and the emotional center. And there are many different descriptions of both of these centers, but we can name a few. For example, the intellectual center is usually ideas, thoughts, concepts, labels, names, terms, definitions, very linear intellectual processing of impressions and of people and of information. It goes in and it's very, let's say, structured and compartmentalized in the form of concepts. That's very different, of course, from our feelings, where we really like someone, or we really dislike someone, or we have a fondness for a certain type of environment and situation that makes us feel happy. This can be instinctive too, of course, but it also can be largely emotional. We feel emotional well-being if we're in a certain kind of environment. In a different environment, we don't feel that well-being. We might get a little dour, a little sour, a little down emotionally. And the how to say, the spectrum and the variation of our emotions is another whole topic that we will go into later. But the important thing is, when we have a thought, again, is the feeling of I. It's my thought, it's my opinion, it's my attitude. I am right or I am wrong. You are right, you are wrong. Intellectual center thinks in terms of yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad. And that's how we think. And we usually hold to one side of the equation. And there's tension and often fighting, argument, even within our own intellectual center. And we do the same thing with our emotional center. But it's more, again, in terms of feelings. When we look at a sunset or look at a friend or look warmly into a friend's eyes, let's say, or look at a beautiful bouquet of flowers, or hear a certain piece of music, it stirs this emotional ambiance in us. It's very different from thought. It's very different from movement, very different from sensation. It's hard to define what an emotion really is because it's more, let's say, it's more molecular than it is psychological. Movement is physical, thought is psychological. And that's just a word, remember, but it's interesting to think what that really means. What is psychological? What is the psychological world? We can't measure it really. Science can't measure the psychological world. And science has never captured a thought and put it in a bottle or something, or under a microscope. And then emotions are more molecular. They're faster, they're more subtle, they're more elusive, even harder to grasp, to contain, to define. The point being here that we have these four centers. Each of them generates impulses, you might say, in the moment, in each moment. And in one moment, one of the centers may predominate. For example, if we're really hungry, the instinctive center will start wanting something to drink or wanting something to eat. And it will even dismiss friends and companions and speak sharply to them because, you know what? Instinctive center needs to fulfill its need. Intellectual center, a strong opinion might surface. And no matter how we feel and no matter who we are talking to, we feel this urge to state our opinion because we have accumulated a certain way of thinking on a certain topic. And now we feel compelled to say it, to express it to other people. And now the intellectual center rises to the fore and takes over, predominates our feeling of I. Same thing can happen with the emotional center or with the moving center. You feel, I think I'll go for a walk. I want to go for a walk. Well, who's that I? Where's that I coming from? That's what the fourth way is trying to show us, is we can observe in ourselves these different I's, and by the tenor, the texture, the flavor of the I that arises, we can assess which center it probably originated from. And we can begin to see we are, as the fourth way says, primarily a response, a stimulus response mechanism or machine. Things happen in our world, in our life, in our environment, and we respond. I should say our centers respond, each in their own way. And then we act. And we interpret this action as this is me. This is I manifesting myself. When in fact, we just become this response mechanism comprised of these four centers and their impulses turning into I's. And then we associate our whole identity with that. And really what I'm saying is this is one way of saying what we are. What we are in the second state of consciousness. This is how we live unaware that this is happening and unaware that we are attaching our consciousness, our awareness to it and deriving a sense of I from it. The third state of consciousness denotes consciousness rising above and around all of these eyes, all of these centers, seeing them in operation and not being identified with them, meaning not establishing identity in them. That's what identification is for us. It's when we establish our sense of identity in something. And the thing that's most immediate that we are establishing our sense of identity in almost every moment is one or more of the eyes coming from the four centers. Mihai, I don't know if you want to, if that prompts some thoughts in you, some more eyes in you. And that's what's happening. See, I've expressed some eyes here, and Mihai's listening just as other people are listening, and it prompts, it evokes eyes. In someone listening to this, it may evoke eyes of opposition, may evoke eyes of, oh gosh, yes, I see what you mean. I didn't realize that. It may evoke eyes of tension. For some unknown reason, there's now tension, or for some unknown reason, there's a feeling of light listening to this. These are all eyes responding from the four centers. So now I'm asking Mihai if what I said evoked any eyes in him on this topic.
Yeah, let's make it practical. So, this attempt we are doing, this reigniting the fragments of the fourth way, we are engaging the intellectual center because we want to do a good job, to be faithful, not to distort, and not to lie, not to be. So we try to be focused intellectually. Yeah. So just there is a certain effort around what we are doing now, and at the same time, so I had some eyes, I had some thoughts. Eyes from the intellectual center is called thoughts. Eyes from the emotional center, they are emotions, although they may still seemingly come in the head. And I'm going to tell you, like an eye from the emotional center is that I have this 20 or 30-year friendship with Peter, and I'm looking at Peter and I feel a sense of closeness and love. And then also I notice I have like there's some sense of fear in my body or nervousness, I guess, connected to this focus to and not to fuck it up. We don't want to fuck it up. So that's the emotional. And at the same time, I'm here in this hotel room where they didn't have a chair, so I had to get a chair. The chair is very uncomfortable. I'm very aware of the chair being uncomfortable. There's an instinctive center. Yeah, so all of these impulses are being and so so I want to emphasize what Peter said here. In the fourth way, the idea is that the centers are a stimulus response, like our body-mind unit. I like this term, unit, your unit, the body-mind, the vehicle, the machine, the biocomputer. Yeah, the biocomputer, which is like much more than a machine. I mean, it's like it grows itself from two cells. It grows itself to be this Peter and Mihai. And then it.
This Mihai, by the way, this is the real AI.
Yes. So it grows
in
itself.
The flesh,
yes. It grows itself according to some, like there's some protocol by the creator from his endlessness or her absoluteness. Yeah. So it grows itself. Then it has the ability to feel. So it feels that they are the senses. These are very important. Primitive men. These are our reptilian brain. So if the emotional center, the instinctive center, the intellectual center, all of these are stimulus response. So if somebody comes to me and tells me that, hey, your presentation was weak and something, you talk too much, then there might be, there'll be a stimulus, and I have a response of a certain emotion. Then if suddenly it starts raining and I'm caught in the rain, then it will affect the instinctive center, it's going to be uncomfortable, and then it may link to the emotion center that's going to be upset about the weather, you know? So in the second state, meaning the state of waking sleep, what we talked last time, in the normal state of consciousness for humanity, when we are asleep, we are unaware of our being, and we are kind of in a twilight, half asleep to what's happening. In that second state, we are at the effect of all these stimuli. You know, somebody says somebody to us, the weather changes, the food that I ate, all of this, so it's like a ship without a rudder. Somehow there's the conscious presence, the master or the owner operator is asleep, and then this vehicle in the second state, it just is blown by the wind, you know, and that's how it is. We have in the second state, we have some idea that I am thinking, I am feeling this, I am doing, I am deciding. In the second state, we have this illusion of that I'm the decider, I'm the thinker, I am the doer. We have this illusion that actually I am doing, I am making things happen, but actually, according to the fourth way, as well as non-dual teachings, it's happening. Basically, this body-mind unit is like a happening, which is affected by the totality of the universe, by planets, by temperature, by a conjunction of a certain planet, by the moon, by the sun, by other people.
By world events.
Yeah. Yes.
It's good to see right now there's a lot of tumult in the world, and many people are reacting with opinions in their intellectual center based on what they know intellectually, which in most cases is very limited, but we're still quick to form an intellectual conclusion or opinion. And then emotional attitudes, feelings, loyalties, defenses. And now is a good time to see that on a big scale too. We are very much these small cogs in a big machine. When the earth and when civilization undergoes pressure and tension, we feel it individually as these tiny receptors, like tentacles. It passes through us, infuses us with a certain kind of energy, and we react, we respond from the four centers, which produce eyes about all of it. And none of this is consciousness. None of this is consciousness. This is the fourth way points out, we do not have unity. We do not have will. We do not have consciousness. We are not consciousness in this second state as such. We are this body-mind of four centers being moved by stimuli. And we're not willing it. And there's no one eye. That's the other thing here we're really getting to, is it's multiple eyes. Man is legion, Gurdjieff said, and I think the Bible says, meaning we are many eyes that change from moment to moment. And there is no central eye governing them.
Yeah, so in the non-dual teachings, Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta and all of this, the Upanishads, there's this idea that there's no thinker behind the thinking, there's no decider behind the decision. It's all unfolding spontaneously by itself as an unfolding of the universe. So there's no personal doer, thinker, feeler. Okay, so it's interesting, in the fourth way, it's the same thing. So which only confirms somehow that it's not that I think, I feel, it's it thinks, it feels, it's happening by itself. So the moving center is doing the moving, which is influenced by the whole environment. The instinctive center is sensing and is producing impulses in order to ensure comfort, the instinctive center is into survival, comfort, and well-being, pleasure, avoiding pain. So yeah, all of this is happening by itself, and there is no another thing in the fourth way is that, as Peter said, these eyes don't know each other. It's like and many of them, there's this allegory in the fourth way, the allegory of like a ship or of a house, like a 4-story house, or let's say I like this of a ship, where there should be like the machine room, the engine room, there's the captain, there's the cook, there is all kind of different departments in a big ship, and that's the allegory of the body mind. And in the second state, when there's not enough self-awareness in the machine, basically the captain is asleep or drunk, and there's no leading, there was no ruling faculty. There's no ruling faculty, quoting Marcus Aurelius here. There's no ruling faculty in the ship. So you can imagine the ship is like, basically the cook comes to the captain room and is deciding the course for like 30 minutes, and then there is the opera singer who was in the cultural department comes and decides the course of the ship for another 30 minutes, and then different people, different part of the staff, they take turns and deciding the course. So, and a lot of these courses, they oppose each other, they go against each other, there are big contradictions between parts. And this is the state of us when we are not remembering ourselves, when conscious awareness is dormant. It's a sleep, and it's, as Gojo would say, it's a far more dangerous type of sleep. Anything can happen at any moment. Another idea, Peter, is this, again, in the Non-Duality, in Ramana, they talk about the teaching there is to become aware of the I thought, or to be aware of the I feeling, in Non-Duality. So notice the I thought and the I feeling, and be aware of it, and then one realizes
Mihai,
that.
Mihai, do you mean the feeling of I behind the thought? Can you be more specific?
There's in Non-Duality, there's this thing that the me thought and the me feeling as a small me, the I thought, I feeling, which doesn't refer to I as that which is aware, is the feeling of me or the thought of me. So in Non-Duality, or at least in Ramana's teaching, the idea was to become aware of the me thought, and in this process of being aware of it, I can see that I am not this thought. I am aware of this thought. So therefore, this me thought kind of collapses, and I is that which is aware of it. So the real I, the aware presence, is de-identifying from the me thought, and the same with the me feeling. Well, in the fourth way, they break this down. There are many eyes, many eyes. They come, even like this happens to me often. I want to wake up in the morning to do something, and there's a certain I that decides this. And in the morning, there's another I, the instinctive center I, that is like, it's cold, I don't want to. No, let's not do it. You see? We can spend a whole life like this.
Another thing related to that is that what's happening is, as we develop as a body mind, we're born, we're formed in the womb, we emerge into this physical world, we're born, we grow physically, mentally, emotionally, live lives, that this mechanism of the human being is constantly trying to orient itself in relation to the surrounding world. And that's correct. That's a remarkable design when you think about it. A human being just as a design in the universe, in the solar system, on Earth, emerges, forms, and tries to orient itself in relation to its surroundings. But what happens is we then develop this sense of I. Through that relationship, it's that and me. It's that and how the emotions being felt about it. It's that and the thoughts, the opinions being concluded about it in me in relation to that as an identity, and so on. And so what happens is we're trying to, as a human being, trying to understand our relationship to things as opposed to simply being conscious of all of it. And now that's a different dimension of perception. It's not, we don't actually have to have a sense of identity in relation to things or in relation to other people. It's possible while that's also happening, and it's normal for that to happen, and that doesn't have to go away. But in addition to that, on top of that, surrounding that, behind that, is an awareness, a consciousness of it that does not require a sense of identity. For example, Mihai mentioned earlier, if someone came and said, Mihai, you know what? That video you guys made, that was really weak. And by the way, you sure talked a lot. You talked too much. Whether that's true or not, the impulse right away is to feel, you're talking about me. I was talking too much. I was giving a weak presentation and so on. But it's not necessary to have that. We could, in fact, we would learn a lot if we were able to actually listen to feedback and take it without a sense of identification, without establishing a sense of identity in relation to whatever it is. And we're back to why this is useful, this many eyes and the four centers, to see how the four centers are constantly reacting to the world, to our life, to the circumstances of our daily life, generating impulses that turn into eyes. And we then become this, we feel we must manifest a certain way or protect the way we appear a certain way, fight back, take positions and all as a sense of identity. And that's what becomes our ego, this central cluster of all of the eyes etching themselves into our being moment after moment after.
Yeah, so give me a moment here. So in the second state, in the state of absence of self-remembering, absence of or low self-awareness, what happens is that somehow all the eyes, they take turns to become I for a moment. And in the second state, we are not aware that there are many. There are many. And we have this feeling that it's a continuous feeling of I. Yeah. It's like, hey, it's me. What do you mean? Who am I? It's me. It's me. But there's this kind of, the consciousness is weak. So then we can't see what is happening, basically. So we have these assumptions. So the feeling, and as you said, Peter, in this lack of awareness state, which is the waking sleep second state, now these eyes, they form this sense of false, in the fourth way they call it false personality, or the imaginary picture of myself, or in other traditions they talk about it as the state of ignorance, the state of feeling and thinking and believing as if I'm a separate, autonomous, independent entity. It's the same thing. That false personality cluster feels as if it's an independent, autonomous, separate thing, separate from the world, from the universe, from other people, from the creator. And yeah. I lost the I. Another thing we use in for is sometimes, you know, as we go about kind of explaining, sometime there was an idea and then just we lost this intellectual I. So that's what
And
it
what's
is.
interesting, this is a good practical example of something, Mihai. People are often aware. They say, "Oh, I lost the thought. I can't remember." What's interesting in that moment is we usually identify and we go grasping after the thought that disappeared. We go grasping after that formulation of I that slipped away without recognizing that that which saw that, which is seeing that we lost the I, that is coming from consciousness itself. And these are wonderful moments sometimes when you lose a thought, forget what you wanted to say and so on, the I disappeared, to give yourself a little time, a little space, and to just be present and realize that which is seeing the thought disappear is now you've turned the light around and it's shining back toward consciousness itself rather than shining on what consciousness was observing or what consciousness was aware of. Now we're getting into, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about, the many eyes, the centers, is how the fourth way gives us solid ground material for what's called self-observation, observing ourselves as a human being. And when I just mentioned turning the light around the other way, now we're touching on self-remembering. So self-remembering is consciousness itself, realizing itself as that which is perceiving all of this, that which is observing all the centers and all the eyes. And it doesn't matter whether you're having a wonderful eye or whether the eye disappeared. Consciousness remains the same. But usually we kind of like it when we have nice eyes. We like our eyes. And we also sometimes, oddly enough, like it when we have terrible eyes. We get accustomed to those, and I'm just a terrible piece of person, you know. But consciousness remains the same amidst all of them. But I mention it just as another practical thing. When you forget what you wanted to say, don't panic, don't run after it. Don't feel what the fourth way says. Don't interconsider about it. Don't be embarrassed about it. Turn around, shine the light back to consciousness itself for a moment and just be.
Yeah, or observe the embarrassment, you know, observe the embarrassment, observe the fear of being judged, observe the sense of not being stupid, whatever. That's a so-called inner considering. It's a fourth way term. We are going to talk more about this in further talks.
And also that reaction is also coming from the centers. Oh gosh, I'm stupid. I feel embarrassed. I feel, that's also just more reaction from the centers. And it's also an example of what we call the wrong work of centers. Now, the instinctive center, intellectual center, emotional center, they start overlapping, overriding each other in a moment like that, where we feel flustered, we feel embarrassed, we feel ashamed, we feel stupid. This is now the centers sort of passing each of them operates with a different kind of fuel. Now fuel is spilling over from them into each other, and it creates all this tension and tumult in the centers that's simply the result of identification. If we don't identify with these things when they happen, the experience is very different. It doesn't mean they go away. It doesn't mean all those impulses that are generating all those eyes go away. It means we're no longer identified with them. We no longer place our identity in them. We are established as the observer, as the consciousness of them.
The I came back to me. So so all of this ongoing bubbling of these impulses from all the centers, so this bubbling of them that going through the so-called mind, the intellectual center, but all the centers, they use the intellectual center as a microphone. Yeah, so as they come like this, one after the other, consciousness, like that which is aware right now, usually in almost everybody, unless we have a special training, it's weak and it's identified with each one of them. And so this reality of the off-gassing of the impulses and consciousness identifying with each one of them in lack of awareness, in some traditions, I like this term, it's called selfing. So the feeling of a personal me, a personal separate I, actually, it's not a personal separate I. it's a selfing. I like it's more like a verb, egoing, because it's not. That's the thing. The false personality, we can't pinpoint it, or the ego. We can't say, "Oh yeah, here it is. I got it. Here it is." No, it's a verbing. I like this more. It's an activity. False personality, ego, or it's like an activity of consciousness identifying with each passing thought, each passing feelings as me. So this creates this illusion of self, but it's selfing, false personalitying.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what somehow, you see, in this way you get more precise about this, what we call ego,
Mm-hmm.
or what we call the separate sense of me. In non-duality, they talk about the separate self. The separate self, you need to be aware of the separate self and transcend the separate self. Okay, nice. But this separate self is actually selfing, and it's a final product of these centers shooting thoughts with which we identify with. So I feel like that using the map of the fourth way, you can be more precise, more crisp, more precise about observing something. And I think the more precise we are about something, the more we see something clearly. Like if I see the hair on my hand, it's obvious. The hair on the hand, there's the hand, 5 fingers, yeah? That is obviously not me, yeah? I am that which is aware of it, yeah? So but if I were like this, I can't see the hand, and I might believe I am the hand. The same thing, if we train ourselves to observe these impulses and to get a sense of where it's coming from in the moment, not just a classification in the mind, but to observe in the moment these things, then it's easier to be like, oh yeah, that's my instinctive center is a little tired. Oh yeah, there's this I from the emotion center came, and then the opposite came. So the more we are precise in our observation, the more we are less identified with what we observe. And the more we are now already, are not in the second state anymore. We are closer towards the third state, where we are aware of the stuff, and there's a sense of not sticking to the stuff.
I like what you said about selfing.
Yeah.
Because one way I think of it, or one way I envision it, is that consciousness is formless. Yes, it's not even like a gas. It's less of a gas than a gas. It's more like light. It's formless. And what happens is when it goes out to become aware of something, it extends itself. It retains a part of itself, because we can be aware of these things to a dim degree. It extends its light or its gas onto the object, and then it forms itself as a sense of self around that object, a thought, a sensation, emotion, and another person. Now I'm dependent on this other person or these other people to underscore, reinforce, maintain my idea of myself. I depend on them for my idea of myself. So awareness has gone out and formed itself as this identity. And the value, again, of knowing this information about the centers and the eyes is that we begin to see that. And as a result, awareness, consciousness as it becomes aware of itself, now unforms from around those things. It may not be fully established in itself yet as just consciousness, conscious of being conscious, but it nevertheless starts to unform as a sense of identity around what it is conscious of. Mm-hmm. And the more we learn this and the more we see this, the more we understand this, the less identified we become. And so we are not so quick to form ourselves immediately around a thought that comes up, or an instinctive reaction or an emotion. We we can observe it, simply observe it, watch it arise, watch it circulate in us, and that's normal. That's what human beings are. But to no longer form around it, awareness no longer forms itself around it. Awareness keeps itself closer to and more in itself. So now there's more energy in consciousness and less in what it's aware of, whereas it's the other way around when we're asleep. There's very little consciousness of consciousness itself, and all of that consciousness is directed towards something and forming itself around something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that, let's say, if you practice Zen, speak Zazen, which,
yes.
Yeah, practicing Zen, and Peter and myself, we were a big fan of Zen, sitting Zazen, like just sitting and just be aware of what is. What is that? Is that we are aware of the eyes. You just sit, close the eyes, and you will just be noticing this off-gassing of the centers, some memory about something, some feeling about something, some thought that actually is connected to instinctive center because there's some pain in the hip. So all of this shooting, and usually in Zen, they call it as the monkey mind. That's the monkey mind going all over the place, which is true. But this monkey mind, actually, it's the many eyes coming and shooting these impulses, and presence being, I mean, as we are on a practice, on an awakening practice, the presence is, we are trying to jumpstart presence, or presence is jumpstarting itself through observing this content, the many eyes, yeah. All right, Peter. So there's a very strong quote from Gurdjieff that comes to my mind, or several powerful quotes that false personality probably doesn't like them, So the idea is this, like this, that if one is not aware of the machine, one is the machine. If one is not aware of the many eyes, one is the many eyes. Yeah. So without conscious awareness, we are identified with every stimulus, every response, every gust of wind. We are, and what Gurdjieff was saying at some point, I remember that he was teaching self-remembering to Uspensky, and Uspensky was trying to practice the sense of observing the eyes as he was walking in a busy street, as well as attempting to be aware of himself, to self-remember. And he was finding it very hard. And then Uspensky, at some point, he succeeded to maintain a state of self-awareness for maybe like 20 minutes, to go around certain streets in St. Petersburg in the 20s or something, or 1920s. And at some point, he ended up at a tobacconist. He wanted to order his cigarettes, and then he forgot. He got identified, and then he said, he said that after 2 hours, he woke up. He, like, with this, before he woke up, there was a feeling that he forgot something, and then suddenly he realized that as soon as he arrived at the tobacconist, then he lost the thread of observing the eyes, the centers, and self-remembering. And anyway, and in that talk, all this is in the book In Search of the Miraculous by Uspensky. Gurdjieff told him, like, listen, like, anybody you meet, all your friends, anybody you meet, anybody you have met, anybody you will meet, everybody you see on the street, on TV, there were no TV at that time, they are machines. They are machines in sleep. So they're machines in sleep, machines they are born, machines they die. Yeah. So there was this very strong approach that although every human being has in potentiality is like an acorn with the potentiality of becoming an oak tree, meaning is a half asleep machine, unconscious, with the potentiality of becoming aware of our true identity and the potentiality of becoming aware of the truth of reality. Yeah, but that we assume we have it, but it's not. Yeah, so if we don't activate, if we, through conscious labor, intentional suffering, and focus work, if we don't manage to activate, jumpstart the master, the owner, then it's almost like, imagine like a car, like that spends its whole life in sleep, imagining, dreaming. And this is, what's the problem with this? It's just suffering. I mean, it's suffering. The more asleep we are, the more suffering there is. And from my book, is a wasted life.
And it speaks to a general idea of the fourth way, Mihai, which is that as human beings, we are already serving the earth. We're already serving the solar system, the moon, the whole cycle of energy that's happening within the solar system, of which we are a minuscule part. And the premise of the fourth way is that we can instead, I was going to say serve ourselves, but more accurately, serve consciousness. And this experience of being a human being can become an awakening of consciousness itself, a revitalization of consciousness, a return to self-realization and self-recognition of itself as consciousness.
All right, so in the fourth way, there's a lot of precise, detailed, technical information about the centers. What we have done so far, it's like, I would say 20% or less. And we are going to actually together do a few months of a fourth way module where we go in depth about the study of these ideas, and not just to be smarter, to have a bigger intellectual center, but to use this knowledge in order to get smarter about not identifying and being less asleep and more conscious and all of that. So we are going to engage in such a module. We are going to announce all of you when that will come. And in that module, we are going to go in much more depth as well as practical applications of this knowledge. We are going to share some practical exercises in this talk, but I wanted to also say here a little bit more in terms of knowledge, knowing that there is much more to go into depth, is that they are in the system of the fourth way, there are all these 4 centers. And actually there's a 5th center that Gurdjieff didn't want to talk about it too much. There's the, at the beginning, because it seemed like it would be not so practical. So there's a 5th center, the sex center, which is connected to the sexual function as well as the scanning and this mysterious choosing of a right mate, and has in itself knowingness of a yes or a no. There is, Gurdjieff didn't want to talk about the sex center because he would say that the sex center operates a very fine energy, which is very, very fast. And in the normal state of consciousness, in the second state, one is too asleep. So it was not practical to go into it. Also, in the fourth way, there's knowledge about, as we become more conscious, we start to be more aware of the energy of the sex center. And also we can, part of the work with a capital W in the fourth way is, as we observe these centers, we are going to, in the second state, they are not working right. The That's an important idea. In a state of sleep, our machine, this divine biocomputer, is not working how it's meant to be. They actually have a allegory that in the second state, and we mentioned it before, it's like you have a jet plane that is now harnessed to a bunch of oxen, and it's kind of towed on some kind of road. Yeah. Actually, the jet plane is meant to fly. Yeah. But the second state, the jet plane is like clunkily. And so what we are trying to do is to to wake up the pilot, as well as through this, the fact that the machine operated in sleep for so long, it's got used to operating wrongly. For instance, wrongly, not some kind of moralizing term, but it's like the cook is not in the kitchen, the captain is not in the captain room, the opera singer is not in the studio or whatever. So yeah. So also the sex center, as we become more conscious, we see how the sex center. Give an example of the wrong work of a sex center. Might be too much information at this point, but basically the wrong work of centers is that some energy from a certain center, it starts to take over other centers. Yeah. So the energy of the sex center, let's say, if it's suppressed for some more moral reason or some kind of cultural reasons, is not allowed to operate itself where it's meant to be and do, then it can go into the intellectual center as fanaticism, like very passionate about some ideas, and it's like very intense and life or death about ideas. But that charge, it's suspicious. So that charge comes from that idea, that's fanaticism, that like intense positionality. It's fueled by the sex center, or in sleep. Basically, it's chaos, and then the machine, it's operating much under its divinely standard of operation. Do you want to say something here, Peter?
In regards to the sexton? Or sexton?
I wanted to talk about the higher centers a little bit to give a more fuller idea. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, because I was going to say the sex center too. It's not that it's meant to be mysterious. It's meant to be that it's not really observable in the second state. And a simple way to also think about the sex center is in terms of sex energy, and that it's kind of like the furnace that from which the fuel is handed over to the instinctive center to then in turn fuel the other centers. Obviously, if you unplug our instinctive center, our mind and our body shut down. So although you can shut down the intellectual center, the emotional center, and the moving center, and you can have just the instinctive center left operating, that's what a coma is, basically. But the sex center is there behind the scenes, providing this very fine energy that then gets filtered appropriately and dispersed through the centers. And it's not necessary to understand, it's not necessary to think of it in terms of physical sex and changing your sex patterns or behavior, or it's all of that has a different context. So just to say, there's this fine energy which Mihai pointed out that can become lunatic fanaticism. It can be political fanaticism, religious idealism, principles about anything. You can get behind. You have all these movements, very extreme movements. I would go so far as to, I hope this doesn't create too much imagination, but if you notice how fast people talk now, some people, they're just talking so incredibly fast. And it's as though this very fine volatile fuel is pumping through their intellectual center and their emotional center so fast, and they're speaking rapid fire. I'm not so sure that they know what they're saying all the time. I certainly have a hard time. And I don't think it's just my age. There's something unusual. This wasn't like this always. That so many people are talking so fast, so rapidly. That's another subject.
Yeah.
Yes, you want to talk about higher centers.
Yeah.
The fourth way says there are these two other centers.
Actually, hang on, Peter. I wanted to say something here. So, although we are not going to touch now on this, as I mentioned, there's much more in-depth information for the purposes of self-knowledge around the centers. Some of this information that we can share, but this makes sense more like if we engage in practical work. Otherwise, it's like abstract to abstract. So there's this, each center in itself has several subdivisions. So each center has several subdivisions that are in charge of several functioning. Also, each center has a negative half and a positive half, which is like it's meant to be like that. Like the instinctive center has like a hot and cold, pleasure and pain. The moving center has like movement or absence of movement, rest. The intellectual center is like yes and no. So these are all for, it's not that it is negative, it's for this how the centers are designed in order for us to discriminate. Think about the caveman, like picking up some fruit and like, no, that's a no. That's the negative side of the instinctive center. Or going on a dark alley and having a feeling like it's not good. Yeah, this is dangerous here or something. So going on a more like lit alley, or in the intellectual center, we hear some idea and then we are contemplating on it, and then we can dismiss it as feeling not true or true. So anyway, we're not going to go in depth about this, but it's good to know that this exists, and actually it's very practical information. Also, the aim. What's the aim here? Through self-remembering, self-observation, and actually we are going to have a whole video on this, on self-remembering and self-observation. But through these fourth way practices, we start to know the centers, and through this, having the centers having more awareness, they start to operate better. And also through having more consciousness in the body mind, then the functioning of each center optimizes. So it's more like closer to how it's meant to operate. But ultimately, through this cleaning up of the machine, initially we become more aware and we clean up the machine. We pick up that jet plane which got rusty, and we kind of put it back together in a good way. Through this work, also we diminish the leaking of energy. Yeah, in the fourth way, there's the idea that the body mind, the machine is like a factory that can process huge amount of energy, process the food, the water, the air. It produces it and makes us to have have a life. But in the second state, the state of being asleep, the factory, the corporation, the factory doesn't work right. So it blows a lot of its energy that comes from food, from air. It blows it into negative imagination, into self-deprecation, into self-pity, into I'm better than you, into negative emotions, being upset about the weather, taking everything personally. So in the second state, the factory is bankrupt, or is not bankrupt, but is under its what's meant to be. So by doing this work, the idea is that the centers are going to operate better. The factory is going to leak less energy, and that energy starts to go to fuel and activate two other centers. It's very important. So in the fourth way, they say that the centers we talked about so far These are the lower centers, the centers of the body-mind. But there are two other centers where Gurdjieff was saying that they are kind of dormant. They are dormant and they are not activated. They are like dormant, they are there, but it's as if they are not there because we don't have access to them. But through this work, basically these two other higher centers, there's the higher emotional center and the higher intellectual center. They say that as we become more awake, the higher emotional center becomes to gradually to pulsate, to jumpstart, to be more there consciously, more frequently, for longer duration. So that's basically the idea that in order to have successful self-remembering or to be aware of ourselves, be aware of being and aware of what's happening, it needs the activity of a higher emotional center. So all of this talk, we are interested to jumpstart and activate the higher emotional center, which is responsible and for this sense of realizing our true sense of identity. And now there's a conscious individuality. There is the master that is aware of the many eyes. It's aware of the cook. It's aware of all these things. There is somebody home now. It's not just the ship doesn't go anywhere blown by the wind. There is a captain in place. Yeah. So that's the initial aim of the fourth way, to activate the third state of consciousness, self-awareness. And then as this, which is a long and arduous work for most people, then there is another center, which is the higher intellectual center, which is actually connected to that activates, in the theory, they say that this activates as now the emotional center, higher emotional center is more on, the third state, self-consciousness, is more on. Then the next step is to activate the higher intellectual center, which activates the fourth state of consciousness, which the fourth state of consciousness in my Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, they didn't talk a lot about it because they felt like we are so far from it that will just instill imagination and daydreaming about it. But they were saying that with the higher intellectual center, you not only know the truth about oneself, but the truth about all that is, and the laws of the universe and how it all works. So to me, this seems very much like the goal of non-duality. When great sages, they speak about this consciousness, the Atman is Brahman, that the self is God, and everything is consciousness, and a felt sense of oneness and disappearance completely of the sense of separation. And there is now absence of sense of lack and peace and all kind of other powers that are totally, let's say faculties, not powers, that are unavailable to men in the second state. So that's some kind of part of the fourth way map about the many eyes and the centers and the higher centers. So the purpose is to optimize the functioning of the lower centers in order to activate our highest potential, which is now, we are no longer an acorn, oak tree. It starts to grow, I guess it's gradually, right? It's not like go from an acorn to a big oak tree, it's like, takes some time.
Also, if I may, I will add that you could say that one characteristic of the third state, or the kind of perception that takes place in the third state of consciousness, is now, whereas in the second state we experience ourselves as this person, this identity as a person. From the perspective of the third state, we see that it is just a human body. It is just four centers operating. When you take away the this core sense of identity, that's all it is. It is very much a machine, as the fourth way says, and it's operating exactly the way it's supposed to operate in the human realm. And the same holds true of the fourth state, where it is perceived that that's true of everything else as well. That's true of all life on Earth. That's true of the solar system. That's true of the universe. This is what the Brahman, achieving Brahman or becoming Brahman is about. Everything is like that. And there's nothing personal about it. We want to change things. We take the whole planet personally. We take the solar system personally. And instead to see it objectively, to see it as it is in and of itself, operating the way it operates. So it's in a more impartial, but not less sensitive. If anything, it's a more profound seeing, perceiving, and realizing. And in this regard, one way to also think about higher centers is that instead of thinking of them as actual centers, I mean, this is just a term, an idea to give the mind a concept for conceiving it, thinking about it, that the higher center, in the second state, we are operating in the dark. The light of consciousness cannot shine, or it's shining very dimly from its own realm into our psychological and physical existence as human beings. And the third state represents, the higher emotional center represents also like an aperture in us. And that aperture starts to open. And as it opens, more light comes in and shines on the centers. And we're not trying to change the centers. We're not trying to change the eyes. We're not trying to become a different person or a better person or things like that. We're trying to see clearly via the light of consciousness. And so this aperture starts to open. You can think of the higher emotional center that way. So it's like an aperture and it starts to open, and the more it does, the more the light of consciousness comes in, and the more that light is cast on the four centers, they naturally start to operate differently. And as Mihai says, now this jet plane, the rust starts to fall off. It starts to clean itself. The engines start to fire, and so on. And the fourth state would be that could be seen, this is just an analogy, that aperture I just described is inside of actually a bigger aperture. And now this small aperture has opened, it's reached its full expansion. And now that the larger aperture of which it is a part also starts to open. And now there's more of a flood of light onto all of this, where consciousness at that level looks upon us as a human being, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, movements, our whole life in a very different, literally a different light, the more it's flooded. And now this light is also flooding our whole view of reality. So the higher centers can be seen not as things, not as further points of identity or higher or better points of identity. They're an expansion of consciousness itself. And the light of consciousness is now shining fully, and that changes the nature of not only what we see about ourselves, but how we operate. So certain things that we experienced before, they don't happen anymore because there's too much light on them.
And it's interesting, even in quantum physics, they discovered that the presence of observing, witnessing, changes the phenomena. The same way, like this thing, like when you come to the kitchen in the night, you turn on the light, the cockroaches, they leave. So, there's the presence of awareness changes the phenomena. Not right away, and some phenomena are very entrenched. So we have some very strong mechanical patterns that have a strong me in them. They're not going to change. And now talking from my clinical work in somatic psychotherapy, it's just being aware of some things will diminish and change by witnessing them a lot, but some things need more piercing awareness and more repeated layers of witnessing and some processing in order to discharge, and release that sense of me from that pattern. But
Mihai, I
want,
wanted to say
yeah,
too, related to all of these tools or concepts for observing the four centers, observing all of the eyes that are generated by them. That process of self-observation is actually coming from consciousness. You can't observe without some light of consciousness. And so actually self-observation is the beginning of that aperture starting to open. It's almost
yeah,
like being on the inside and starting to crank open that aperture from the inside of the second state. And now by
yeah,
observing ourselves in the second state, we get more and more light coming through that filter. We open it up so the filter opens. And then self-remembering is actually, what is called real self-remembering, is actually on the other side of the hatch. It's on the outside of the hatch. And there's a different crank up there, let's say, for opening the aperture even wider. So self-observation and self-remembering are really two sides of the same thing, but you can't, not everyone can just intuit how to jump right to self-remembering, to the third state.
mm-hmm.
But that's the beauty of this fourth way, is it gives us a stepping stool to get up to that crank, and through self-observation. So Mihai said earlier, what's the aim here? What's the aim of all this? Why observe yourself? Well, that's why. It starts to allow more light. And up to the point that the light can realize itself.
And it's interesting here that I do see a very clear similarity with maybe yogic knowledge of the different chakras that are not operating well. And we have various issues, different chakras, different blockages around, and so there is definitely some strong correspondence, yes. I can see. And also in this yogic tradition, they speak about that as the kundalini rises, or this conscious awareness increases in the system, and the lower chakras start to open or operate how they are meant to be. Now the energy activates the higher, the third eye, and then there is the crown chakra too. So the third eye chakra and the crown chakra, that seem to correspond to the third and fourth state of consciousness. This is interesting. Also, this work will bring about a shift of feeling, an experiential felt sense of identity. In the second state, we feel we are the body, or I feel I'm me. But I don't know what it means. That me is some me as Mihai, as the mind and the body. And actually, in the second state, the identity is with every eye, which is a fragment. Every eye is like a penny. One of my teachers used to say, every eye, every thought is like a penny. But our presence, our conscious presence, is like $1 billion. So we are lost into a fragment and like losing our immensity of what we are. So in the second state, we are the feeling of identity into a small penny. It's like having tight shoes. It's uncomfortable. So as we increase the level of awareness, somehow, as we become a serious practitioner and the interest in the work becomes a priority for us, it's not just some hobby or some YouTube video here and there or some meditation here and there. It becomes like, hey, this is important to me. This is a love of it. I love this work. Yeah, this is growing. Then this interest in this work becomes my most important priority in my life. That is an advanced stage. One can still be not fully awake at all, but now the feeling of identity shifted. Now it's already, the feeling of identity is into me as the practitioner, me as the seeker of a seeker of truth, of a devoted my life to evolution. but it's still a sense of personal me trying to, as there's more third state on, and the consciousness activates, becomes more knowledgeable of itself, and has a chance to, the more it is on, the more it has chance to taste itself. Then again, the feeling of identity may shift from not me as a seeker, but the sense of identity as the awareness itself. The sense of identity is less personal. It's more like as that which is aware. So then we are much less sticking to stuff. Somebody, I'm hungry. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it doesn't take over the whole sky. Yeah, somebody called me an asshole. Yeah, okay. I can even call him an asshole back, but it's not a big deal, So there's more. In the second state, the identity is very sensitive. We are very sensitive. Every little thing will ruffle our feathers, The third state, or the identity there is less sensitive, is more. What can I say? When I say sensitive, is that it's very easy to be hurt and very easy to be, embarrassed and all of that. At the same time, in the third state, becomes sensitive in a way that's more aware. I'm much more aware of every little thing in my body, of the energy, of a change of energy in my partner, much more sensitive and attuned, yet less blown all over. Yeah. And now, as far as this progression of identity changes, I think, as we go toward the four states, and I have a sense that, and I had some of my teachers that were more awake than myself, and they were speaking in terms of that the feeling of identity is that I am consciousness, and consciousness is all that is. So I am the presence, but I am the mountain. I am the computer. I am everything, or I am nothing. So now it becomes kind of really esoteric, abstract. And that's why I really love Gurdjieff, that he didn't want to go into talking about fourth state, because he knew all the people were 2 steps below. So he wanted to make it practical, not to encourage dreaming, spiritual dreaming.
This is interesting from the point of view that, and I think Gurdjieff, that's what the fourth way addresses, is that we begin the so-called search from inside the second state, which is weird when you think about it. And the more you understand what that means, the more kind of weird it is, the more strange it is. What we do, we begin our search to escape from inside the prison. Consciousness is only inside, trying to fathom, first, that it realize it's in prison, and secondly, to fathom how it could get out and what that would mean. So, and again, we're back to self-observation. Self-observation is an attempt for consciousness, is an attempt of consciousness to start finding its way through the maze of the prison to the opening where there's more light, at least to the prison yard first.
So, Peter, how about we offer some practical exercises? Because basically, when I met the fourth way, when I was really a teenager, I was impressed. It's very practical. I mean, some listener may think like, dude, this is so heavy, so intellectual. God, I don't know if this is for me. I hear you. But this is very practical, very practical. So we can offer maybe some ways in which we can make practical this knowledge about the many eyes and the centers. And to me, what does it even mean to make it practical? So to me, practical has to do with raising from the second state of consciousness when we are half asleep and identified. Practical means to do something or not do something or something that will help us be more awake. Yeah, And initially we are asleep all the time, and we have just few glimpses of being more aware, and then in the long periods of sleep. So the progression is some glimpses that are short, more frequency of glimpses, longer glimpses, more depth. Yeah. So that's what practical is for us. All right. So let's say an exercise in the practical application of the fourth way, we use these alarm clocks or exercises or small aims that have many functions. There are different kind of exercises, but all of them are from this point of view to set up something, knowing that we are kind of asleep, something that will wake us up for a moment. Yeah, to remind us to be more aware. Yeah, be less identified. So some of the exercise I like, let's say, well, definitely it's obvious now, let's say for the moving instinctive center, let's say for the moving center, the moving center can happen all in sleep, basically. I mean, everything can happen in sleep, but some a good exercise, the moving center wants to be efficient and to keep going. And the moving center somehow gets a little bit irritated if its momentum is interrupted. So some good exercise for me was...
Which is true for all the centers.
And
that's what identification is. It results in momentum in all of our centers. And each of them gets irritated, you might say, by having the momentum interrupted.
Yeah, you know, we're sleeping at 5 a.m. in the morning, and it's a lodge here with a piano. And somebody came and started playing the piano, although there was a sign there, hey, don't play piano until 10 a.m. And my partner stand up, bam, went there, told the person, hey. So yeah, I can see that the instinct center didn't want to be disrupted. But anyway, for the moving center, one exercise I liked, or several exercises I like, is to, when I catch myself being in this energizer bunny mode, being very busy and having frantic movements and rushing. Yeah, I know that I'm unconscious. I'm unconscious. I'm not remembering myself, and actually it's stressful, and I'm missing the present. So a good exercise to catch yourself like that, to pause, to stop, or even set up some bell to kind of to interrupt the mechanical efficiency momentum of a moving center, and pause and have a little minute break, take a couple of breaths, and become aware of the body, the mind, the heart, and being aware of being. Another one is, like, we can just set up a simple thing, like, let's say, you know, I fidget a lot. I do all these things, fidgeting, and I can use sometimes this to not, the exercise is to not fidget. However, that will not be possible. So whenever there's fidgeting happening, I kind of wake up and I become aware of it. And for one angle, it doesn't matter, fidgeting or not fidgeting, doesn't matter. But I'm using this as an alarm clock to realize, well, I wasn't aware my body was doing, and I was lost in imagination. So catching myself fidgeting and becoming more awake. Also, I notice whenever I catch myself fidgeting, there's usually some kind of fearful imagination or some daydreaming. Yeah. So there are things like that. I guess we can go from every center, just offer some practical exercises. They are all meant to shock us in a way, to realize, oh wow, I was not here. Yeah. And right away initiate a sense of being more present to the present and being more aware of being. All of them are like that. It's not about becoming like a perfect non-fidgeting machine that is intentional. It's not about that. Do you have some of your favorite, let's say, exercise, or what you recommend that is simple for somebody?
I was going to suggest I thought of two exercises, actually four altogether, but two for the quote unquote body and two for the quote unquote mind, which would be the ones I'm going to recommend are for a combination of the intellectual and emotional center together. And the other two would be the combination of the instinctive and moving center together. And so the one example would be just for a week. Another thing is don't try to do these too long because they'll become an end in themselves. The purpose is these are a means toward being more conscious and reminding as reminders to remember yourself. And so a simple example I feel is to put my toothbrush in a different place. Instead of it always in the little bowl or on the shelf or something, put it in a different place, a good distance away, in a drawer or in another part of the cabinet on another side, something, and you will notice that your moving center reaches for the toothbrush without you being conscious. And when you find yourself reaching where it used to be, you will see that, wait a minute, the moving center was operating all by itself without any consciousness associated with it. Or consciousness was identified, asleep in, operating with little attention and just reached the moving center. And so that can be quite interesting to again, just for say a week.
And that one, Peter,
yes.
That one is awesome because it's morning. We are morning, we are like this. So this brings this makes it practical because it brings the work in everyday plain moments, inconspicuous moments, boring moments. So it brings this reminder to wake up when you are in the shower, when you are pooping, when you are peeing, not just when you are satsang with some enlightened teacher or some special occasion. So I like that.
The other one I thought of was that I do sometimes is when getting in the car, there's a tendency to just open the door and jump in the car and head off. And so, again, just for a week, perhaps, to open the car door, open it all the way as though you're going to get in the car, but not get in the car. And instead, close the door again and then open it again. Being conscious of the fact that you're there watching your body, your moving center, open the car door. Usually we're in a hurry. It goes back to momentum. Usually we're in these momentums. We're comfortably asleep. Consciousness is comfortably asleep. And we're just operating as a body-mind, as four centers. So open the door, then close the door again. Try not to do it too quickly. Close the door again and then open it again. And another thing about these kind of exercises, try not to make it obvious to anyone else that you're doing it. Don't make a show of it. It's for that's just the ego, even the spiritual ego at work. But to understand why you're doing this, you're doing it to interrupt the momentum, but you're not doing it just to interrupt the momentum. You're doing it so that that interruption will evoke consciousness, arouse consciousness, wake consciousness back up again, just for a moment, and then see how long that lasts after you get in the car and start driving.
So that it's almost a disruption of a sleep. Basically, it's actually it's a putting a spoke in the wheel of mechanicality. These exercises, and it's not about just putting a spoke in the wheel. It's, as you said, is to a little shock, reminding one about self-remembering, and then engaging in that as much as we can.
And again, this isn't about controlling anything for the sake of controlling it. It's about seeing how momentums are often the result of identification. And identification means consciousness asleep. And so we're working backwards from the result, which is the momentum, to the thing that caused it, which is identification, to the source, which became identified. So yes, to use these as a means, not an end.
I mean, we can have a whole talk. To me, it's a very emotional subject because I always like to make it practical. And actually, there's some, if, you know, the cool thing about being in a group, the fourth way is designed to be in a group. So you have more reminders. And so we can all work with several reminders or with some small aims. We can have a daily such alarm clock I use for myself, or a weekly one, or a monthly one. And then we can share some of these alarm clocks. So then we are together hanging out for fun, or we're together in a meeting. Then we work with some of the same exercises. We can alert each other. You know, there's another aspect of the fourth way. We can remind each other, provided that we have an agreement about that. Yeah. Well, we can have a whole discussion about exercising alarm clocks. I like for the, I mean, I love this idea to bring the work into inconspicuous, so-called unimportant moments, because that's the false personality thinks that some moments are boring and unimportant, and some moments are special, but that's an illusion. So I like this thing when I go to the bathroom, let's say to pee, to have a aim to, whenever I go to the bathroom or even sit on the toilet, the tendency to go in daydreaming. You know, you go and you're like, so it could be to have an aim to be like a meditation. This is meditation. Yes, the body is peeing and pooping, but I take that as a self-remembering. Yeah. Or let's say whenever you come to a stop sign, you know, the stop sign, to even choose, okay, whenever for 1 week, whenever I see a stop sign, to take it like, hey, wake up, remember yourself. Yeah.
And
or
to actually stop. You know, it's
full
rare
stop.
that we
Yeah.
do a complete stop. It's because it's a full interruption of the momentum of the moving center.
Yeah.
And the moving center and instinctive center don't like that. So to really stop, despite the other cars behind you wanting, you know, pushing, edging you on,
Yeah.
to stop completely and feel the stop and realize you're conscious of the full stop. Yes, that's actually
it's
a big
hard. Yeah.
but again, the aim is not to do that for its own sake. Mm-hmm. It's to use it as a trampoline for consciousness.
I mean, from one angle, these things like Gurdjieff would say this, do what it does not want to do. And that would be sometimes a way towards more self-remembering. Like the it being the machine in sleep. Yeah. So the machine in sleep doesn't like to have a full stop. It's because it breaks the efficiency, the momentum. So we can create a lot of exercises to just intentionally, for a little bit of time, go against the natural operation of the centers, just to create some little friction to become more awake. Yeah, this is not self-flagellation. This is not forever. For instance, with the instinctive center, the instinctive center doesn't care about self-remembering, about consciousness, about God. The instinctive center doesn't care about all of this. So that's a problem, because and it's very powerful, the instinctive center, and it's usually the feeling of I is in the instinctive center. So for instance, when we eat, there is difficult exercises, but the tendency in sleep is to eat like this, maybe go full on like this, and then to shove food in the mouth and chewing, and then swallowing and feeding some more, and then talking on. What's happening is that there are two things that are happening. It's that's an eating frenzy. The animal self is like the inner dog, which is fine. That's what it's meant to do. And however, the problem is that we are fully identified with the dog, the inner dog. There's no conscious presence. And moreover, I'm not tasting the food. I mean, I'm missing out. And there's always the next bite, the next, like, you know, or I must say I do this sin TV, yeah, have a TV and watching TV, totally lost in a TV and in a lost in a, not aware of food, not aware of myself, not aware of nothing, like fascination, yeah. So a good exercise is to set up this thing like you get the food to take a bite, put it in, and not feed another bite before you finish swallowing what you have in the mouth, yeah. And you are making effort to really taste each bite and be present to each bite. And I mean, it's nice. I mean, it's our life. And also be aware of the interlocutor, be more aware instead of being sucked into the dog, yeah. And you'll see it's hard. You do this, you're aware, present, and not going daydreaming. Another thing, we are eating and we are somewhere else, so trying to be consciously where we are, not somewhere else. So just this exercise of watching for imagination, that's an ongoing exercise, you know, and dropping it when it's not necessary. So whenever now you will catch ourselves that, and I'm feeding it. There's this, it wants to, the moving center wants to keep going. And yeah, so when you catch yourself, put it down, finish swallowing, and then the next one. That is a difficult exercise. But,
it is, Mihai.
you know,
I just wanted to add to that that is a very difficult exercise.
yeah,
And so what I would recommend if somebody wants to try that in the beginning is to do it just for 3 bites. Say, okay, for the next 3 bites, I'm going to do what Mihai suggested. I'm going to put food in my mouth, chew it, taste it, swallow it completely before putting any more food in the mouth. To just do it for 3 bites, that's doable. And then also what that does is it gives contrast to watching yourself for the rest of the meal. And you will see that without consciously trying to do that, you won't do that. Because again, the aim here is to promote consciousness, not to become a disciplined eater. You know, there are military colleges where they teach people how to eat. And it's like that.
Yeah.
They have to come up, bring the fork up. They don't put their head down. They come up and they bring, and it's like that. And it becomes a discipline. It doesn't become a means to more consciousness. Yeah.
Also, it's good this exercise to alternate them, not to do it forever, not to be a professional alarm clock setter. So we use it for some time,
Yes.
Then we drop it. We use something else, we drop it. You know, we make the work practical by discovering the difficulty of the present moment, as Uspensky would say. In order to work in the right way, you need to find out the difficulty in the present moment. Meaning, when I'm falling asleep, with what's happening here? So put some alarm clocks there. I guess the alarm clocks are all meant to interrupt sleep and promote more self-remembering.
That brings me to the other 2 exercises I was going to recommend that have to do with the intellectual and emotional center together. And both of them are in the context of when we were with other people. And the first is to not interrupt, to try to observe in myself the urge to interrupt someone when they're speaking, not because it would interrupt them, because I already have this impulse to say something in response before they're even finished speaking. But to try to put that aside and actually listen to what the other person is saying without interrupting them. This is it sounds so simple. It sounds that you would think everybody's doing that all the time, but nobody's doing that almost ever. And so to actually listen to what the other person is saying and not interrupt them while they're speaking. Wait for them to finish. Unfortunately, we tend to speak and then go, to let the other person know, I got more to say. And then we keep going and going and going and going. So if you're really listening to what other people say without interrupting them, you may not end up saying very much because they're doing all the talking. And the other exercise connected to that is when responding, to not try to step on the other person's statement or opinion or point of view or observation. So try not to squash it with opposition or with a better point of view or a more right point of view. To try to contribute to the conversation, to keep it moving up instead of it being a competition. And both of the things I've said, like the eating with the food, are very difficult. And you can try it just maybe even once. Okay, I'm gonna just really listen this one time to what this person is saying without interrupting. And I'm gonna try not to step on or squash their equally valid perspective.
I guess all of these exercises initially, they will help you see that you can't do them. And it's a valuable thing. We can see how unconscious we are, how asleep we are, and how this is happening by itself. And actually, as we become more awake, we are going to be horrified because we see what's happening. We see all the wrong work. We can see all of this unconscious operation of the body mind. So some people are like coming to me and saying, oh my God, I'm trying these things that you said and I'm seeing so much shit. And it's like, I'm doing worse. And I'm telling them, no, you're not, this was always happening like that. You were just unaware of it. So there are all these gremlins and cockroaches in the house. And now it's just a little bit more light on so you can see them. Yeah. So it's natural to be horrified initially. We have to keep going. Yeah. I mean, we can have whole long talks with like tens, maybe hundreds of such exercises. But I think we can talk about this later, and also this will be more practical and suitable as we are doing the fourth way module and engaging with people. Yeah.
Maybe we can even bring, as we do the modules and talk about more specific ideas, when we do that each time, just recommend one or two relevant exercises around that topic.
Yeah.
We can see how that goes, but that's a very practical way to do it. And
Yeah.
that reminds me, because we've covered a lot of material and we will continue to, hopefully, that one of the best ways for us to navigate successfully where we're trying to go with this, with these modules, is to get some feedback. If anyone listening has any questions about what we've said, wanting further explanation, or has comments or suggestions, or just general feedback. You know, when Ouspensky was asked when he published his books, he said, what's the purpose? The most important thing is the questions and answers, you know, the live discussion, the interaction at the large meetings he would hold. Those things directed him as to what people needed to understand better and what they were more interested in their personal work. So that will make this much less theoretical.
Yeah.
So it will help us make it more practical.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so if you have any questions or in relation to this talk, so feel free to make a comment on YouTube or write to me. I'll put my email address there. Also below, you will see the playlist that contains all the previous talks. Also, you will see below a link to Peter's website where you can find his books. He has some wonderful books on the fourth way, as well as non-duality, hybridized and integrated with the fourth way, as well as other books on prayer, and I recommend that. Also below, there will be a playlist that I created as I was working with clients and doing groups. It's called the Toolbox of Practices. Toolbox of Practices, where are short videos. Each one, especially the first 15 videos from that playlist, they are kind of contain fourth way related exercises about walking, about driving, about the cell phone, about, remember, fourth way is in life. It's not some special retreat somewhere. So it's in the middle of chaos. So If you watched us up to here, you are totally going against the YouTube algorithm. And thank you for your attention. And if you are interested to join us when we start engaging in this fourth way module, let me know here and put you on the list and stay in touch with you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And may it benefit you all as it benefited us. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai.